Hi, welcome to Pedders USA Tech Session. Today we're going to talk about how to set the ride height and the pre-compression on Pedders XA or Pedders Supercar coilovers. The first thing we're going to do is set the pre-compression. You can see right now that the spring is loose. We need to put pre-compression on it. If we fail to put the correct pre-compression, we'll compromise the ride quality and handling with incorrect jounce travel. We supply every XA owner with a really nice set of XA wrenches. Come in a little plastic bag and you've got an Allen wrench to make adjustments. It's a nice complete kit. I'm old-fashioned. I like to use a hammer and a drift. So the first thing I'm going to do is loosen the locking ring. See the locking ring? Spring seat. Knock the locking ring loose. I backed it off a little bit. So now we're going to start screwing the spring perch up. And what we want to do is take the travel out of the coil. I'm going to make this hand tight. Now, hand tight is going to vary a bit between technicians or installers. My hand tight might be tighter, or it might be looser than your hand tight. But if I do all 4 coilovers and hand tighten them all, I'll be consistent across the board. So I am now nice and snug here. And from this position, I am going to take and turn this 1 full turn. And that is going to give me the pre-compression that I need. I am marking 1 notch on the lower spring perch. You can see the red mark. We're going to add 1 full turn for our pre-compression. I'm also using an SKF tool. It's called an HN10-11. It fits literally every single one of our coilovers. It's nice, it's thick, it's got a good hand grip. So let's start turning, and we're going to get our 1 full turn for pre-compression on the front coilover. And there's our red mark coming up. We now have 1 full turn, and this coil is nice and snug. The next step is to bring the locking ring up. And we're going to make sure this locking ring gets nice and tight. And for that, I'm going to use my drift and hammer. We're now locked in position. Using a hammer and drift will leave a mark on the ring. It is mission critical that you don't use a chisel. A chisel is a cutting tool. It has to be blunt. Screwdrivers fall into the same category as a chisel. If you hit this with a screwdriver, you will start cutting it. Hit it hard enough and you'll split it. No chisels, no sharp objects, no screwdrivers. A blunt, simple drift. Now that we have the preload set, we're going to worry about ride height adjustment. To loosen this ring, we're going to go back to that favorite tool, and we're going to use our hammer and drift. We've now broken the ring loose. These are alloy rings. They're actually hollow to save weight. This is a steel ring because it's locking against a steel clevis. Why a steel clevis? This is a street car. We know that you're going to hit potholes. We know that you might hit a curb. We want to make sure that our clevis, at the very least, is as strong as an OEM clevis. And we actually design our clevises to be stronger than the OE. So this steel clevis gives you the protection you need to be able to drive these coilovers safely on a street. You'll do the exact same thing in terms of loosening this locking ring on a set of XA coilovers. This one, as I said, happens to be a Supercar with a reservoir. The Supercar canister connects to the monotube with a pipe and a swivel fitting. It spins as a height is adjusted up or down. You don't have to remove the canister to adjust the height because that bottom connection will swivel. But you do have to loosen it so that the canister can move up and down in the bracket. If you fail to loosen the Allen screws that hold this canister in place, you'll break the pipe, break the seal, and create a leak. So it is mission critical that we loosen these. I'm going to use a 4mm hex head 3/8 inch socket. Let's loosen these up just a bit. Okay, we can see now that the canister can travel freely. To adjust the height, we're going to screw this assembly into or out of the lower mount. And you can see that will not affect the pre-compression on the coil whatsoever. To set the ride height on a supercar coilover out of the car is extremely simple. We know that if we measure from this flat on the monotube to the outside edge of the clevis and get a measurement of 24mm, we'll end up with exactly 660mm of ride height. So let's check it and see where we are. We put the tape in, we pull it out, and right now we are at 510mm of depth. We need to take that to 24. So we're going to screw the entire assembly out. Now, if we're doing it on the car, we're going to use a wrench. And because we're screwing it out, we'll put the wrench on the lower ring. It's already tightened against the spring seat, and it'll turn the entire assembly in one direction. Very simply as we go, just like that. To make the ride height adjustment on the vehicle, we always have to jack the car up. These are aluminum threads. They'll strip if you don't take the weight off the threads. So remember, we need to screw it out far enough to get our 24mm of depth. If we're doing it on the bench, it's very simple. We're just going to turn the entire assembly. You can see how the canister swivels, and we'll just keep going here until we get to 24mm. We've gone just a bit too far. We need to back it off 2mm. Let's check that depth. We are exactly there. Now we're going to take the locking ring and tighten it up against the clevis. Let's get it good and hand tight. Pull out our favorite tool, because there isn't a job you can do on an automobile that doesn't involve a hammer. We've got that locking ring firmly in place. The next step is to align the canister. Remember, we set it so it could float up and down in the bracket? Now we want to get the canister straight and parallel to the monotube. I'm going to take my 4mm and we're going to tighten this up. Remember, we're going into aluminum. Hand tight is going to do the job. Don't over tighten. Notice I'm using a 3/8 inch socket, and I'm not out here on the end exerting a ton of leverage, being delicate right inside. This coilover is now ready to be installed on the car as soon as we set the damping. Remember, supercars have compression and rebound adjustment. Compression is always going to be on the canister. Rebound is always going to be on the top. Each knob is labeled hard and soft. Hard is always going to be clockwise. So we're going to tighten this up to full hard. We've run out of adjustment. We're at full hard. We're going to back this off exactly 16 clicks. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Compression is now set at the midpoint. Let's set our rebound. And once again, you'll see the hard and the soft. We have the OEM mount up on top. Rebound has been set. Pre-compression on the coil is set. Locking ring is set. Ride height is adjusted for 660 millimeters and the locking ring is set. The compression unit is set to 16. This unit is done and good to go. We've got an OEM lower control arm sitting right here. This happens to be the new ZL1 arm. You can see where it has the reinforcement in the arm to take the new drop link for the outboard mounting sway bar that is standard on the ZL1. And of course, we've got the Pedders Z-bar, which is a 32 millimeter bar. When we install this coilover unit, we have to make sure that we're installing it with the canister in the correct orientation. If we drop this unit in like this, you can see exactly what's going to happen. We are going to pinch this hose against this reinforcement, and it's going to leak. That's because this unit is designed to be installed this way, where there is plenty of room for the hose to be in the arm. You may also notice that the OE bush is no longer in the arm. That's because we're all set to install an EP7264 Pedders steel jacketed urethane bush to upgrade the arm. Back to our favorite subject, Supercar and XA coilovers. The Supercar and the XA coilover adjust exactly the same way in terms of height. Remember, the difference between this canister and the front canister is we have a hose back here. That means that you can adjust within this range the height of the rear coilover and not have to loosen the bracket. The Supercar and XA rear coilovers for the 2010 Camaro install exactly the same way in terms of setting ride height. We've got a locking ring down here. Remember, we said that out of the box this unit is preset and ready to go with the correct ride height. So all we have to do back here is make sure this ring is tight. We get out our favorite tool. Got to have a hammer, and let's give it a couple of whacks, make sure we're tight. This ring is now locked in place. Now it's time to adjust the preload. These are shop parts that we have laying around here. They've been on our L28 from Lingenfelter. And you'll notice we're missing an insulator on this one. It's irrelevant for the illustration. You'll see when we put this notch into the OEM mount that we've got lots of room down here on the spring seat. So once again, we need to adjust the spring seat to take up the slack in the coil. It'll center itself. It has a plastic insulator between the coil, and we should be using the OEM rubber up top here. So once again, we're going to make this hand tight. Not quite there yet. We'll just wiggle the coil a bit, get the adjustment in the right place. Give it a couple of more turns. And that's as tight as we're going to get by hand. Now we need 10 millimeters of preload on this. We could mark this ring like we did the last time, but in this case, I think it's going to be easier to measure between two known points. So we're going to pull out our digital caliper, and we're simply going to measure between this ring and this ring. Let's pull it out here. I'm doing it upside down so that you can see it. We're going to get a measurement here, and that measurement says 40.65 millimeters. It needs to go to 50. We're going to get out our wrench, and we're going to tighten. Let's double check and see where we're at. We're now at 46.4, 4 more millimeters. I'm going to move the locking ring up flush against this. I'm going to hold it in place so I can see us moving 4 more millimeters. You can see we're starting to get some load on the coil. It's a little harder to adjust. And we are now at 49.87, and that's where we're going to leave it. Get out our hammer, get on that locking ring, get her good and tight, and that assembly is going nowhere. Compression's on top, rebounds on the bottom. We're going to set the rears to full hard. Remember, that's always going to be clockwise. So let's go full hard. We're now at full hard. We're going to back it off 8 clicks. We're 8 clicks off full hard, compression set. We're going to adjust with the cable adjuster up on top to 16. So we can go to full hard and back it off 16, just like we did in the fronts. Pedders Supercar set of coilovers could just as easily be XA coilovers ready to go on a Camaro. The height has been pre-adjusted and locked in place on both. The pre-compression has been set with the locking rings. Remember, on the front coil, we take it up to hand tight plus 1 full turn, and that's good and hand tight. Keep that in mind. In the rear, we're going to 10 millimeters of pre-compression, and that means we take this ring to good and hand tight, make sure that coil is seated in the notch, wiggle it around, keep turning till you can't turn it anymore by hand. From there, crank this ring up using your wrench, 10 full millimeters. We measure from here to here. All Pedders coilovers adjust the same way. The bracketry is different, but the principle is the same. Set of rings for the preload, locking ring for the height. Height adjusts by screwing into or screwing out of the lower mount. I'd like to thank you for spending your valuable time to learn a bit more about our supercars and XA coilovers.